I have played a lot of Rivals of Aether since it came out 5 years ago, and in that time, I've gone from someone with zero competitive platform fighter experience to being one of the best players in the world. For those picking the game up now, Rivals has a brutal learning curve because for the longest time, the only thing to do was competitive 1v1 matches. So even the low-level veteran players who have stuck with the game did so because they're okay with getting beat up over and over again. As someone who regularly fights new players during gear battles on my stream, I run into a lot of common questions about how to improve at the game. Usually after I'm already playing the next person, so I don't really remember anything, but I figured I'd make a video going over frequent mistakes that I see, as well as some universal advice that will help people get better using the resources available to them within the game and within the community. Panic parrying is something that everyone playing Rivals will do at some point. Rivals is an offense-focused game, and when pressed into a corner, you have few defensive options to rely on. While parry baiting is a tactic used at high-level play, that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm referring to is parrying as an automatic response to something not going as planned. While this is very common to do after whiffing and expecting counterattack, I've seen people do this while they are comboing someone because their opponent DIs in a way they didn't expect. I'm also talking about when faced against a projectile, the threat of the projectile itself will have such a strong effect that people will parry if their opponent moves in their general direction. It's important to remember that parries have whiff lag in addition to their end lag, and failing to execute a parry will leave you open to be hit by the same projectile you were just trying to avoid. Parrying is something that should always be reactionary and deliberate. I cannot tell you how many openings, how many stocks, and how many games I've gotten because someone decided to parry because of the fear of getting hit. It is much better to build a habit of parrying on reaction, even if it means losing a few games because you get hit by projectiles. The best way to practice your parries is against an actual opponent, particularly against characters with telegraphed projectiles. If you have a friend to help you out, parry projectiles back and forth with each other until you get a good grasp of the timing. If not, hop online and while playing out your match, remember at all times that your opponent has their projectile as an option, and be ready to parry it whenever the opportunity arises. Autopiloting is sort of an all-encompassing term that can mean a few different things. Basically, it's when you assume the outcome of a situation before anything actually happens, and as a result, you perform an action without thinking about it. This is what's going on when your opponent falls out of your combo, but part of your brain insists that you will still hit them if you keep going. In the same way that you can't assume that your opponent is going to throw a projectile at you, you also can't assume that your opponent is going to move or DI in a way where your attacks will hit them. Each and every attack that connects with your opponent gives them an opportunity to DI differently. It is your job to focus your reaction time on the moment after you hit them in order to extend your combo or land a kill confirm. Fortunately, there's an easy way to practice these deliberate attacks. First, go into training mode. I like to use Zetterburn because he's a character with average weight properties, so you get a general idea of what combos will work across the cast. Then, set your CPU DI, drift, and tech to random, and then combo them until they are out of hit stun. Then, pause the game and unpause the game to reset their percent to 0 and do it all over again. This is what I personally did to practice my reaction time before going to a big tournament, and while it's undoubtedly harder to do this during online games, it's still good practice and the core principle remains the same. It's important to note that autopiloting happens with more than just attacks. Autopiloted movement options are very common, and if you move the exact same way, your opponent will be able to use that information to their advantage. An easy way to break these sort of patterns is to mix in doing nothing at all.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Briefly, before we move on to the next point, be careful about rolling the same way every time you tech. Doing this lets your opponent extend combos even further and is one of the easiest habits to break that will have the largest effect on your games. Also, if you notice that you're getting tech chased regardless of mixing up your tech directions, it can sometimes be better to not do a grounded tech at all, as this guarantees that you will escape, even if that's offstage. Replays are by far the single most valuable tool that you have at your disposal for getting better at the game. While it's possible to adapt to your opponent on the fly during a match, you have infinitely more time and more ways to process what happens during a game by looking at it after the fact. Be sure to set your replays to autosave, and after any game where you find yourself struggling to know what to do, head on over to the replay section and load it up. The hard part about fighting games is accepting that every single time you get hit, it's because you made a mistake in some way. But that's okay. Making these kinds of mistakes is an important part of getting better as a player. During a game, your brain doesn't consider the mistakes you're making because it's focused on playing out the rest of the match. And it's through replays that you can spot habits you didn't even know you had, and keep mental notes of them for your future games. Having trouble recognizing why you're making mistakes? Luckily for you, there's an entire Discord built specifically to help out new Rivals of Aether players. They have everything from character attributes and frame data, mentors who will work one-on-one with you, and they even have amateur tournaments for you to enter against other new players, ensuring that you'll have plenty of replays which aren't you getting free-stocked over and over again. Seriously, I could make this video and just say join the Academy Discord and it would still be useful. If you genuinely want to get better at the game, you should give them a shot. Rivals is a really hard game, and I spent a couple thousand hours on it before I felt like I knew what I was doing. I made the mistake of assuming that fighting people over and over again was enough to get better, but the bulk of my improvement came from analyzing my games by myself and with others. I hope these lessons that I've learned over the years will save you from the trial and error that I had to go through. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.